Once upon a time, there was a man named Hyok Ryan Mugung. He was the leader of the evil sect, one of the three major powers in Murim. The Taoists, who believed in harmony with the universe, insulted him for simply being the head of the evil sect. He lashed out because he was tired of hearing, which evolved into a great war between good and evil. Even though the war took place in many places, Hyok's true aim was the Wudong sect, the home of the Taoists who insulted him. He waged war against them, destroying their temples and killing their sect master and elders. Despite wanting to spare the others and explaining that he only wanted those who insulted him, the Wudong members attacked him first. They cursed him for his treachery and cruelty, which he found amusing. The war eventually ended in a truce, but Wudong, which was known as the Sacred Land for 1,000 years, lost its power and became the weakest of the 9 major sections. 15 years later, Hyok was on his deathbed, reflecting on the past. He could recall his memories and felt sympathy for his disciples and elders who had sacrificed everything for him. He desperately wanted to see his loyal follower, Cheonwoo Myung, who was searching for an elusive herb of immortality to save him, even though such herbs didn't exist. Hyok wished to see Myung before his final moments. Hyok started to have trouble breathing. He was 80 years old, and memories of his life flashed before his eyes. He had betrayed the arrogant, defeated the wicked, and backstabbed his allies to reach his current position. He had all the wealth and women he wished, and he was one of the 3 powerful figures in Murim. Even though he had all that, he still had some regrets. If he had known he would die like this, he would have used his hidden money. He also regretted not being able to enjoy a steamy night with his new concubine. When he turned to see his loyal disciples and elders, they cursed him as he hadn't died yet. They were relieved to finally be free from him. Even his official disciple, whom he had raised with great care, was against him. They shared the hardships they had endured and looked forward to a better future without him. Hyok realized how everyone saw him as a scum, but he is one though. He sensed a presence nearby and saw an underworld agent calling his name. It was said that if you heard your name being called 3 times, you would die. Accepting his fate, Hyok was surprised to see his beloved subordinate, Cheonwoo Myung, arriving. He was glad to see Myung, assuming he had given up on finding the immortal herb. However, Myung had actually found it, shocking everyone. Myung quickly fed Hyok the herb, ignoring the dirt on it. As the Reaper called Hyok's name for the 2nd time, Hyok wished someone would silence the Reaper. Myung noticed Hyok struggling to swallow the herb. So he squeezed it and let Hyok drink the liquid. Despite the disciples and elders trying to stop him, Myung persisted. Hyok fought against time as the Reaper began saying his name for the 3rd and final time. In a race against death, Hyok gave his best effort. In the end, he lost and felt his soul leaving his body. He had missed the opportunity for immortality, preparing to leave behind his wealth and concubine. But as he felt his soul being sucked back into his body, he was happy to be alive again. However, the Reaper grabbed him by his hair. Hyok had finally won the game of push and pull against the Reaper, but instead of being frustrated, the Reaper smiled at him. Hyok decided to close his eyes until the Reaper left. When he heard voices of the old around him, he opened his eyes, expecting the grim Reaper to be gone. To his surprise, he saw an old man with the symbol of Wudong, and he realized he was in a new room surrounded by the Taoists. Hyok was confused about what was happening. He wondered what the Reaper had done to him. Taoists told him he was lucky, but he didn't understand why. He tried to get up, but his body was paralyzed and in great pain. The Taoists witnessed him falling off a cliff while searching for herbs for his master. Hyok was surprised by this memory. Suddenly, he experienced a headache and new memories flooded his mind. He learned that he was a boy who had been abandoned by his parents and saved by a kind Taoist. The Taoist had lost his skills due to an injury from an evil sect's leader. The boy, who was 17 years old, fell from the cliff while trying to gather herbs to save his mentor. Hayok was overwhelmed by these memories and wondered whose they were. As the Taoists felt his pulse weakening, they hit his pulse point and infused him with a pure form of energy, called deity chi. This transfer caused even more pain, and Hayok questioned whether they were trying to kill him at the Reaper's behest. The old men were happy that the transfer was successful, while his master thanked them. However, Hayok doubted if it was truly a help, considering the intense torture he endured for 4 hours. As the sect master was talking to Hayok's master, an elder discussed about making him a new disciple, and after some consideration, they decided that Hayok should become a first-rate disciple to carry on his master's legacy. Hayok's master agreed, promising to train him to the best of his abilities. The sect leader accepted Hayok as a first-rate disciple, bringing joy to everyone. Hayok's master expressed his gratitude, and the sect master asked for a new name for Hayok, following the tradition of the Wudong. His master named him Jin Mu, and although others were pleased with the name, Hayok found it lame. The sect master aided Hayok's recovery by infusing him with deity chi again. And Jin Mu wondered why they couldn't use medicine or acupuncture instead. Hayok Ryan Mugung, once the ultimate ruler in Murim along with the leaders of the Eclipse demonic cult and the Orthodox Murim alliance, was now considered irrelevant. Hayok became Jin Mu, a first-rate disciple of the dying Wudong group. Jin Mu pondered what the Reaper had done to him, and as he closed his eyes, he found himself inside the body of a young man. Additionally, the deity energy inside him suppressed other forms of energy, preventing him from using his old martial skills, which he was proud of, Shadow Dragon Core energy. Whenever his master called his name, Jin Mu's body would instinctively respond kindly to him, a reaction he couldn't control. His master's name was Myong Jin, a person Jin Mu remembered vividly from the past. When he destroyed the Pond of Peace and 3 out of 5 palaces, Jin Mu came across him. Myong Jin fought until the end to protect the Violet Cloud Palace. Jin Mu regretted sparing Myong Jin. He believed he should have killed him to avoid this situation. When Myong Jin asked him to have lunch, Jin Mu responded without thinking with a smile on his face. Inside Jin Mu's body was one of the rulers of the Murim, and he is now cutting onions, making the soup and dutifully preparing his master's lunch. He smashed the plate at that thought and wondered when he would leave this goddamn place. 3 months had passed since Hayok became Jin Mu. Myong Jin watched Jin Mu practice martial arts while sipping tea, feeling nervous about what he would do. Jin Mu placed a sword in front of him and used his chi to transform it into a charged sword, surprising Myong Jin. Normally, achieving this level of skill would take many years. Myong Jin exclaimed how extraordinary it was for Jin Mu to learn it in just 3 months. Jin Mu realized that his master forgot to mention that he learned everything through verbal teachings alone. After Jin Mu's recovery, he received verbal teachings in the 6 Yong divine arts since Myong Jin had lost his own skills. Although Jin Mu found it annoying to start from scratch, he couldn't go against his master's words due to the body's memories and instincts. Myong Jin wondered if it was because of the infused deity chi or if Jin Mu was simply a genius. Jin Mu knew that Myong Jin wouldn't understand, but he used to be one of the world's strongest beings, so he grasped the power better. In reality, Jin Mu found learning their techniques quite enjoyable, growing his internal energy every day and deepening his understanding of the basic moves. Compared to the dangerous techniques he used before, this was more systematic and safer. He understood why this place was famous. As time went by, he immersed himself deeper in his training, reminiscing about his days as a vagrant training in martial arts. He trained so intensely that he lost track of time, and a year passed without him realizing it. He used his technique to continuously launch swords and struck a tree at a distance, leaving marks. Now, he was able to use sword chi, which was a level higher than the charged sword. He was confident that he could easily defeat other first-class disciples. He felt that Wudong sect martial arts were superior to his previous techniques, except for the superficial aspects. However, one problem remained: his internal energy was improving too slowly. He wished he could use his old energy techniques, but it was impossible to coexist with the deity chi already within him. He wanted to find a way for the two energies to coexist, and there was a method to achieve it. Half a year ago, an annoying second-class disciple mentioned this while observing his training. The second-class disciple wondered if he should put in so much effort for the position of master disciple. He shared the information that becoming a master disciple would provide an opportunity to train under the sect master, which initially didn't interest Jin Mu. However, when he learned that the master disciple would learn how to control two energy types, his interest was piqued. Using two energies within one body was the Wudong sect's most secret technique. Jin Mu believed this technique had been lost for centuries, as he had never seen a martial master utilize it before. If he could learn it, he would be able to control his shadow dragon core energy without interference from the deity chi. To confirm, he asked the second-class disciple again, who affirmed its truth. While contemplating, the disciple mentioned that it was impossible since many first-class disciples aspired for that position. Jin Mu sneered, as no one knew his true potential. Throughout history, strength always prevailed in Mirim, and he decided to achieve the master-disciple position through his own strength, defeating anyone who stood in his way. Now that he had discovered a way to use his old techniques, only one thing prevented him from leaving the Wudong sect: his master's health, which concerned his current body. He cooked chicken for his master. As seeing Myong Jin alive after everything was a miracle, and his body worried about him daily. Whenever he tried to leave, his body compelled him to return. Myong Jin needed to be healthy for him to leave, and the only way to ensure that was by feeding him meat. He grew frustrated with the Wudong bastards who fed the sick person grass instead of protein and vitamin-rich meat. It took some time, but eventually, he managed to make his master eat meat, despite it being prohibited. Now that his master was better, it might be possible for him to leave for a while. As he continued his training, he pondered why he hadn't mentioned his plan to his master. He was certain that if he asked about it, his body would reveal everything, as it was incapable of lying to him. While lost in thought, he heard a voice nearby and instinctively swung his sword, only to find a stranger standing there. The person screamed in response. The stranger asked if he was Jin Mu, but Jin Mu had never seen him before. Based on his clothes, Jin Mu deduced that he was a second-class disciple. He wondered how someone could resemble a pig. The stranger introduced himself as Chung Wu from the Culmination Hall, delivering food supplies to Jin Mu. He noticed the overweight body and concluded that neglecting training must have caused the weight gain. He wondered why the pig had come instead of the regular second disciple. Jin Mu asked him to leave the food anywhere and focused on his own training. However, Chung Wu's astonished reactions to Jin Mu's every move irritated him. Jin Mu suggested that Chung Wu do his own training, but Chung Wu replied that he had no training scheduled. Oblivious to Jin Mu's hint that he was in the way of his training, Chung Wu asked for permission to stay and train on his own since he had nothing else to do. Jin Mu understood that it was normal for peers to hang out on their days off, so he inquired if anyone from the Culmination Hall would accompany Chung Wu. Learning that no one would, Jin Mu asked one final question about people avoiding Chung Wu if he approached them, to which Chung Wu confirmed. Jin Mu realized that the old disciple had likely asked Chung Wu to switch with him. Jin Mu observed that Chung Wu didn't realize he was being bullied. The thought of his loyal disciple Cheon Wu Miang, who would laugh even when beaten, came to Jin Mu's mind. Jin Mu asked Chung Wu to train in the corner while reminiscing about Cheon Wu Miang from the evil sect, the only one he missed. Curious, Jin Mu watched Chung Wu as he performed the 7-star fist's martial technique, displaying proficient basic skills but failing to consider his body type, resulting in slower movements and blind spots. Jin Mu felt frustrated watching him and decided to teach him how to fight, although he could tell that Chung Wu didn't understand. With a sigh, Jin Mu grabbed Chung Wu by the ear and made him stand, positioning himself away from him. Jin Mu called for Chung Wu to attack, and despite starting late, Jin Mu's fist reached Chung Wu. Surprised, Chung Wu was advised to go straight for his opponents, without relying on superficial movements. Realizing that Chung Wu lacked intelligence, Jin Mu resorted to teaching him through physical hits. He taught him techniques like targeting the eyes and groin, which Chung Wu considered cowardly. But Jin Mu argued that there was nothing cowardly in a fight. Jin Mu continued teaching until sunset, and finally, Chung Wu collapsed from exhaustion. Jin Mu acknowledged Chung Wu's tenacity as he moved until Jin Mu told him to stop. Jin Mu believed that Chung Wu hindered his progress to become a master disciple and instructed him to send someone else to deliver food, telling him to return only if he wanted to die. Chung Wu was shocked and left the place, while Jin Mu watched him depart, hoping he would never come back. Jin approached Jin Mu and discussed Chung Wu, a conversation that Jin Mu deemed stupid. Jin expressed pride in Jin Mu's teaching abilities, and Jin Mu wondered why he was so happy about such a small thing and went to prepare that day's meal. The following day, while Jin Mu's master went for a walk, he seized the opportunity to train since Chung Wu was also absent. It was then that a first-class disciple named Jinhyo, who was senior to Jin Mu and one of the top 7 disciples of the Wudong sect, arrived with Chung Wu and accused him. He wondered why he was looking for him. Jin Mu respected his senior brother, but Jinhyo yelled at him and asked if he was responsible for something. When Jin Mu inquired about it, Jinhyo explained that he was talking about an incident involving a technique called the 7-star fist. Chung Wu had used this technique and injured another child who might not be able to have children in the future. Jin Mu was actually proud of Chung Wu, but Jinhyo accused Jin Mu of teaching him cowardly tricks in the land of Taoism. Jin Mu questioned what the issue was as long as Chung Wu didn't harm anyone. Jinhyo's response surprised Jin Mu. Seeing his junior brother's strange behavior, Jinhyo wondered why he was acting differently. Jin Mu was an innocent child who obediently served his master. But now he was behaving like a street vendor. Jinhyo believed that Jin Mu's arrogance was a result of the energy he acquired from the 6 Yang divine arts and the teachings he received. Despite not being a disciple of the Grace Palace responsible for discipline and punishment, Jinhyo wanted to teach Jin Mu a lesson as his senior brother. Jin Mu wondered if Jinhyo could really do that and was glad to have an opportunity to gain recognition from the sect's higher-ups. Jinhyo wondered where Jin Mu had learned to talk like that. Jin Mu was pleased to have the chance to fight, something he had been itching for a while. Since Jinhyo didn't make a move, Jin Mu initiated the fight swiftly. As Jinhyo blocked the attack, he was certain that Jin Mu intended to draw blood. Jin Mu was using the Divine Gate 13 Swords technique, but his moves were precise rather than flashy. Jinhyo decided to use the same technique to teach Jin Mu a lesson and aimed for the back of Jin Mu's scabbard to avoid causing harm. Jin Mu targeted Jinhyo's groin, but Jinhyo managed to block it. When Jinhyo felt relieved, Jin Mu aimed for his eyes in the next move. The Divine Gate 13 Swords technique was meant to disarm opponents or render them unable to fight by targeting their wrists. It represented the Wudong sect's principle of avoiding lethal attacks. However, Jinhyo found it strange that Jin Mu only aimed for his eyes and groin throughout the fight, as if he were fighting as a member of an evil sect. Determined to counterattack, Jinhyo launched an attack. But Jin Mu evaded it and struck his wrist, causing him to drop his sword. Jinhyo never expected to lose, as it had never happened before, but he didn't feel bad about it. Although Jin Mu targeted his eyes and groin, he smoothly transitioned into different moves. In just a year, he had grown like his master, who was once the most exceptional disciple. Jinhyo felt the urge to praise him, but Jin Mu suddenly attacked him again, hitting his face and continuing to beat him even though the winner had already been decided. Jin Mu felt an exhilarating thrill that had been suppressed by Jin for a long time. Chung Wu was shocked by the scene and how mercilessly Jin Mu beat Jinhyo. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. He thought Jin Mu's abilities were incredibly cool. Seeing Jinhyo dazed, Jinmu asked Chungwoo to take him to the medical room. As Chungwoo carried him away, Jinmu was confident that news of his victory over Jinhyo would spread and bring him closer to becoming a master disciple. He believed that strength would be favored even in the Taoist sect. If he defeated all the top disciples, he could learn to control double internal energies. He eagerly anticipated what the future held. Since Jinmu's victory over Jinhyo spread to the sect master and elders, they were astonished to hear how Jinmu, who had been a disciple for only a year, managed to defeat Jinhyo using the modified Divine Gate 13 swords and 7-star fist techniques to teach Chungwoo. Jinhyo was still unconscious, so the Culmination Hall master revealed the news based on what he heard from Chungwoo. They were surprised to learn that a disciple had made modifications to the martial arts techniques. The conclusion they reached was that Myong-jin must have taught Jinmu, as he had previously expressed dissatisfaction with flashy techniques and emphasized efficiency. The sect leader reflected on the past, recalling when the sect was attacked by an evil sect master and their entire sect was burned down. In recent years, the sect leader had been occupied with dealing with the Chongyang Merchant Association. Determined to investigate further, he decided to visit the medicinal hall where Jinmu and his master would be the next day. The following day, Chungwoo arrived at the medicinal hall after switching his affiliation. Jinmu was shocked and vowed to defeat Jinhyo, whom he believed was responsible for this change. Jinmu's master arrived and revealed that he allowed the switch, as Jinhyo had visited him the previous night to discuss the matter. Jinmu felt frustrated and pleaded with his master, expressing that he wasn't ready to take on students yet. However, his master believed him. Having also heard from Jinhyo about the fight and Jinmu's victory. Despite his student's unconventional fighting style, the master was genuinely proud of Jinmu's achievement. Unable to deny his master's words, Jinmu accepted his first disciple. The master asked Jinmu to prepare a meal as he was hungry, and Jinmu, thinking about how his master was always hungry, went to do so. When Chungwoo asked what he should do, Jinmu grabbed him by the shoulders and instructed him to remember 3 things. Firstly, he was not Jinmu's master. Secondly, he should do whatever Jinmu told him to do. And lastly, not to shout like wow or hooray during their training. Feeling the pressure from Jinmu's grip, Chungwoo agreed to these instructions. Jinmu then instructed him to go around the mountain to catch some chickens. After a while, Chungwoo returned with the chickens, and Jinmu, lying flat on the table, ordered him to kill and boil them. Seeing Chungwoo obediently following his orders, Jinmu felt satisfied being able to boss him around. Chungwoo expressed his concerns, mentioning that their actions went against one of the Wudong sect's 10 commandments, which strictly prohibited eating meat. In Wudong sect internal energy training methods, if you eat meat before your deity chi matures, then your deity chi will not grow, but only internal energy would grow. Therefore, their food was made by mixing various grains and herbs, and felt that it was indeed a peculiar sect. Jinmu reassured him, saying that both he and his master occasionally ate meat. He then took the DSH to his master. While delivering the food, Jinmu cursed the Wudong sect for restricting the diets of growing kids. When he presented the meat to his master commented that he felt healthier, which pleased Jinmu. However, his happiness stemmed from the fact that he could leave the sect without worrying about his master's well-being. When his master offered him a piece of meat, Jinmu declined, stating that he had some from outside that he planned to share with Chungwoo. His master asked why he hadn't caught 3 chickens since they were growing kids and only planned to share one. Jinmu wondered how much his master had become a degenerate Taoist. He left, asking his master to call him after he finished his meal. Outside, as he was about to eat his meal, Jinmu discovered that Chungwoo had already finished it. In frustration, he chased after Chungwoo for eating his share as well. Just as he caught up to Chungwoo, a man shouted at him to spit it all out. Jinmu turned around to see the sect masters and elders present, leaving him shocked to see them there at that moment. To find out the consequences Jin Mu would face for breaking the commandment and to uncover the future endeavors of Jin Mu, the former evil sect master, stay tuned.